back to Jordan's Books. I'm your host, Jordan. Today, we are going to continue reading Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone. And we are going to start reading in the 9th chapter, The Midnight Duel. And I will be starting this on page 143. And I shall start reading now. Harry had never believed that he would meet a boy he hated more than Dudley, but that was before he met Draco Malfoy. Still, first-year Gryffindors only had potions with the Slytherins, so they didn't have to put up with Malfoy much. Or at least, they didn't until they spotted a notice pinned up in the Gryffindor common room that made them all groan. Flying lessons would be starting on Thursday, and Gryffindor and Slytherin would be learned together. "Typical," said Harry abruptly. "Just what I always wanted. To make a fool of myself on a broomstick in front of Malfoy." He had been looking forward to learning to fly more than anything else. You don't know you'll make a fool of yourself," said Ron reasonably. "Anyway, I know Malfoy's always going on about how good he is at Quidditch, but I bet that's all talk." Page 144. Malfoy certainly did talk about flying a lot. He complained loudly about first years never getting on the house Quidditch teams, and told long, boastful stories that always seemed to end up with him narrowly escaping muggles and helicopters. He wasn't the only one, though. The way Seamus Finnegan told it, he'd spent most of his childhood zooming around the countryside on his broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who's listening about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. On Charlie's old broomstick. Even Ron would tell anyone who'd listen about the time he'd almost hit a hang glider on Charlie's old broom. Everyone from wizarding families talked about Quidditch constantly. Ron had already had a big argument with Dean Thomas, who shared their dormitory about soccer. Ron couldn't see what was exciting about a game with only one ball, where no one was allowed to fly. Harry had caught Ron on prodding Dean's poster of West Ham's soccer team, trying to make the players move. Neville had never been on a broomstick in his life, because his grandmother had never let him near one. Privately, Harry felt she had had good reason, because Neville managed to have an extraordinary number of accidents, even with both feet on the ground. Hermione Granger was almost as nervous about flying as Neville was. This was something you couldn't learn by heart out of a book. Not that she hadn't tried. Typical Hermione. At breakfast on Thursday, she bored them all stupid with flying tips she'd gotten out of a library called Quidditch Through the Ages, which Muggles can actually get it at their local library or at a bookstore, which is not said in the book. Neville was hanging onto her every word, desperate for anything that might help him hang onto his broomstick later. But everybody else was very pleased when Hermione's lecture was interrupted by the arrival of the mail. Harry hadn't had a single letter since Hagrid's note, something that Malfoy had been quick to notice, of course. Malfoy's eagle owl was always bringing him packages of sweets from home, which he opened gloatingly at the Slytherin table. A barn owl brought Neville a small package from his grandmother. He opened it excitedly and showed them a glass ball the size of a marble, of a large marble, which seemed to be full of white smoke. It's Remembrall, he explained. Gran knows I forget things. This tells you if there's something you've forgotten to do. Look, you hold it tight like this. If it turns red, oh, his face fell, because the Remembrall had suddenly glowed scarlet. You've forgotten something. Neville was trying to remember what he had forgotten when Draco Malfoy, who was passing the Gryffindor table, snatched the Remembrall out of his hand. Harry and Ron jumped to their feet. They were half hoping for a reason to fight Malfoy, but Professor McGonagall, who could spot trouble quicker than any teacher in school, was there in a flash. What's going on? Malfoy's got my Remembrall, Professor. Scowling, Malfoy quickly dropped the Remembrall back on the table. Just looking, he said, and he slipped away with Crabbe and Goyle behind him. At 3:30 that afternoon, Harry, Ron, and the other Gryffindors hurried down the front steps onto the grounds for the first flying lesson. It was a clear, breezy day, and the grass rippled under their feet as they marched down the sloping lawns toward a smooth, flat lawn on the opposite side of the grounds to the Forbidden Forest, whose trees were swaying darkly in the distance. And now I am on page 146. The Slytherins were already there, and so were 20 broomsticks lying in neat lines on the ground. Harry had heard Fred and George Weasley complain about the school brooms, saying that some of them started to vibrate if you flew too high, or always flew slightly to the left. Their teacher, Madame Hooch, arrived. She had short gray hair and yellow eyes like a hawk. "Well, what are you all waiting for?" she barked. "Everyone stand by a broomstick. Come on, hurry up." Harry glanced down at his broom. It was old, and some of the twigs stuck out at odd angles. "Stick out your right hand over your broom," called Madame Hooch at the front, "and say up." "Up!" everyone shouted. Harry's broom jumped into his hand at once, but it was one of the few that did. Hermione Granger's had simply rolled over on the ground, and Neville's hadn't moved at all. Perhaps brooms, like horses, could tell when you were afraid, thought Harry. There was a quaver in Neville's voice that said only too clearly that he wanted to keep his feet on the ground. Madame Hooch then showed them how to mount their brooms without sliding off the end, and walked up and down the rows, correcting their grips. Harry and Ron were delighted when she told Malfoy he'd been doing it wrong for years. "Now, when I blow my whistle, you kick off from the ground. Hard," said Madame Hooch. "Keep your broom steady. Rise a few feet and then come straight back down by leaning forward slightly. On my whistle. 3, 2... But Neville, nervous and jumpy and frightened of being left on the ground, pushed off hard before the whistle had touched Madame Hooch's lips. "Come back, boy!" she shouted, but Neville was rising straight up like a cork shot out of a bottle. 12 feet, 20 feet. Harry saw his scared white face looking down at the ground, falling away. Saw him gasp, slip sideways off the broom, and wham! Wham! A thud and a nasty crack, and Neville lay face down on the grass in a heap. His broomstick was still rising higher and higher, and started to drift lazily toward the Forbidden Forest and out of sight. Madame Hooch was bending over Neville. Her face as white as his. "Broken wrist," Harry heard her mutter. "Come on, boy. It's all right. Up you get." She turned to the rest of the class. None of you is to move while I take this boy to the hospital wing. You leave those brooms where they are, or you'll be out of Hogwarts before you can say Quidditch. Come on, dear." Neville, his face tear-streaked, clutching his wrist, hobbled off with Madame Hooch, who had her arm around him. No sooner were they out of earshot than Malfoy burst with laughter. Did you see his face? The great lump!" The other Slytherins joined in. "Shut up, Malfoy!" snapped Parvati Patil. Parvati Patil. Ooh, sticking up for Longbottom," said Pansy Parkinson, a hard-faced Slytherin girl. "Never thought you'd like fat little crybabies, Parvati." "Look!" said Malfoy, darting forward and snatching something out of the grass. "It's that stupid thing Neville Longbottom's Gran sent him." The Remembro glittered in the sun as he held it up. "Give that here, Malfoy," said Harry quietly. Everyone stopped talking to watch. Malfoy smiled nastily. I think I'll leave it somewhere for Longbottom to find. How about up a tree?" "Give it here! Give it here! Give it here!" Harry yelled. Sorry, I was having a little bit of trouble adjusting my voice. But Malfoy had leaped onto his broomstick and taken off. He hadn't been lying. He could fly well. Hovering level at the topmost branches of an oak, he called, Come and get it, Potter." Harry grabbed his broom. "No!" shouted Hermione Granger. "Madame Hooch told us not to move. You'll get us all into trouble." Harry ignored her. Blood was still pounding in his ears. He mounted the broom and kicked hard against the ground, and up he soared. Air rushed through his hair, and his robes whipped out behind him. And in a rush of fierce joy, he realized he had found something he could do without being taught. This was easy. This was wonderful. He pulled his broomstick up a little to take it even higher, and heard screams and gasps of girls back on the ground, and an admiring whoop from Ron. He turned his broomstick sharply to face Malfoy in midair. Malfoy looked stunned. "Give it here," Harry called, "or I'll knock you off that broom." "Oh, yeah?" said Malfoy, trying to sneer, but looking worried. Harry knew somehow what to do. He leaned forward and grasped the broom tightly in both hands, and it shot toward Malfoy like a javelin. Malfoy only just got out of the way in time. Harry made a sharp about face and held the broom steady. A few people below were clapping. No crab and goyle up here to save your neck, Malfoy," Harry called. The same thought seemed to have struck Malfoy. Catch if you can, then," he shouted. And then he threw the glass ball high into the air and streaked back toward the ground. Harry saw, as though in slow motion, the ball rise up in the air and then start to fall. He leaned forward and pointed his broom handle down. Next second, he was gathering speed in the steep dive, racing the ball. Wind whistled in his ears, mingled with the screams of people watching. He stretched out his hand, and a foot from the ground he caught it, just in time to pull his broom straight, and then he toppled gently onto the grass with the Remembrall clutched safely in his fist. Harry Potter!" His heart sank faster than he just dived. Professor McGonagall was running toward them. He got to his feet, trembling. "Never in all my time at Hogwarts." Professor McGonagall was almost speechless with shock, and her eyes flashed furiously. "How dare you!" Might have broken in your neck. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't his fault, Professor. Be quiet, Miss Patil. But Malfoy, that's enough, Mr. Weasley. Potter, follow me now. Harry caught sight of Malfoy, Crabbe, and Goyle's triumphant faces as he left, walking numbly in Professor McGonagall's wake as she strode toward the castle. He was going to be expelled. He just knew it. He wanted to say something to defend himself, but there seemed to be something wrong with his voice. Professor McGonagall was sweeping along without even looking at him. He had to jog to keep up. Now he'd done it. He hadn't even lasted 2 weeks. He'd be packing his bags in 10 minutes. What would the Dursleys say when he turned up on the doorstep? Up the front steps, up the marble staircase inside, and still Professor McGonagall didn't say a word to him. She wrenched open the doors and marched along corridors with Harry trotting miserably behind her. Maybe she was taking him to Dumbledore. He thought of Hagrid, expelled but allowed to stay on as gamekeeper. Perhaps he could be Hagrid's assistant. His stomach twisted as he imagined it, watching Ron and the others becoming wizards while he stumped around the grounds carrying Hagrid's bag. Professor McGonagall stopped outside a classroom. She opened the door and poked her head inside. "Excuse me, Professor Flitwick. Could I borrow Wood for a moment?" "Wood?" thought Harry, bewildered. Was Wood a cane she was going to use on him? But Wood turned out to be a person, a burly fifth-year boy who came out of Flitwick's class looking confused. "Follow me, you two," said Professor McGonagall, and they marched up the corridor. Wood looking curiously at Harry. "In here." Professor McGonagall pointed them into a classroom that was empty except for Peeves, who was busy writing rude words on the blackboard. "Out! Out, Peeves! Out, Peeves!" she barked. Peeves threw the chalk into a bin, which clanged loudly, and he swooped out cursing. Professor McGonagall slammed the door behind him and turned to face the two boys. Potter, this is Oliver Wood. Wood, I've found you a seeker." Wood's expression changed from puzzlement to delight. Are you serious, Professor?" "Absolutely," said Professor McGonagall crisply. "The boy's a natural. I've never seen anything like it. Was that your first time on a broomstick, Potter?" Harry nodded silently. He didn't have a clue what was going on, but he didn't seem to be being expelled, and some of the feelings started coming back to his legs. "He caught that thing in his hand after a 50-foot dive," Professor McGonagall told Wood. "Didn't even scratch himself. Charlie Weasley couldn't have done it." Wood was now looking as though all his dreams had come true at once. Ever seen a game of Quidditch, Potter?" he asked excitedly. "Wood's captain of the Gryffindor team," Professor McGonagall explained. He's just a build for a seeker too," said Wood, now walking around Harry and staring at him. "Light, speedy. We'll have to get him a decent broom, Professor. A Nimbus 2000 or a Clean Sweep 7, I say. I shall speak to Professor Dumbledore and see if we can't bend the first-year rule. Heaven knows, we need a better team than last year. Flattened in that last match by Slytherin. I couldn't look Severus Snape in the face for weeks." Professor McGonagall peered sternly over her glasses at Harry. "I want to hear you're training hard, Potter, or I may change my mind about punishing you." Then she suddenly smiled. "Your father would have been proud," she said. "He was an excellent Quidditch player himself." You're joking." It was dinner time. Harry had just finished telling Ron what had happened when he'd left the grounds with Professor McGonagall. Ron had a piece of steak and kidney pie halfway to his mouth, but he'd forgotten all about it. Seeker, he said, "but first years never. You must be the youngest player in about a century," said Harry, shoveling pie into his mouth. He felt particularly hungry after the excitement of the afternoon. "Wood told me." Ron was so amazed, so impressed, he just sat and gaped at Harry. "I start training next week," said Harry. "Only don't tell anyone. Wood wants to keep it a secret." Fred and George Weasley now came into the hall, spotted Harry, and hurried over. "Well done," said George in a low voice. "Wood told us. We're on the team too, beaters." "I tell you, we're going to win a Quidditch Cup for sure this year," said Fred. "We haven't won since Charlie left, but this year's team is going to be brilliant. You must be good, Harry." Wood was almost skipping when he told us. "Anyway, we've got to go. Lee Jordan reckons he's found a new secret passageway out of the school. Bet it's that one behind the statue of Gregory the Smarmy that we found in our first week. See?" Fred and George had hardly disappeared when someone far less welcome turned up. Malfoy, flanked by Crabbe and Goyle. "Having a last meal, Potter? When are you getting the train back to the Muggles? You're a lot braver now that you're back on the ground, and you've got your little friend with you," said Harry coolly. There was, of course, nothing at all little about Crabbe and Goyle, but as the high table was full of teachers, none of them could do more than crack their knuckles and scowl. "I'd take you on any time on my own," said Malfoy. "Tonight, if you want, Wizard's Duel. Wands only, no contact." "What's the matter? Never heard of a Wizard's Duel before, I suppose?" "Of course he has," said Ron, wheeling around. "I'm his second. Who's yours?" Malfoy looked at Crabbe and Goyle, sizing them up. "Crabbe," he said. Midnight, all right? We'll meet you in the trophy room. That's always unlocked." When Malfoy had gone, Ron and Harry looked at each other. "What is a Wizard's Duel?" said Harry. "And what do you mean in you're my second?" "Well, a second's there to take over if you die," said Ron casually. He getting started at last on his cold pie. Catching a look in Harry's face, he added quickly, "But people only die in proper duels. You know, with real wizards. The most you and Malfoy will be able to do is send sparks at each other. None of you knows enough magic to do any real damage. I bet he expected you to refuse anyway. And what if I wave my wand and nothing happens?" Throw it away and punch him on the nose," Ron suggested. Excuse me." They both looked up. It was Hermione Granger. "Can't a person eat in peace in this place?" said Ron. Hermione ignored him and spoke to Harry. "I couldn't help overhearing what you and Malfoy were saying." "Bet you could," Ron muttered. "And you mustn't go wandering around the school at night. Think of the point you'll lose Gryffindor if you're caught. And you're bound to be. It's really very selfish of you. And it's really none of your business," said Harry. Goodbye, said Ron. All the same, it wasn't what you'd call the perfect end to the day, Harry thought, as he lay awake much later, listening to Dean and Seamus falling asleep. Neville was back from the hospital wing. Ron had spent all evening giving him advice such as, "If he tries to curse you, you'd better dodge it, because I can't remember how to block them." There was a very good chance they were going to get caught by Filch or Mrs. Norris. And Harry felt he was pushing his luck, breaking another school rule today. On the other hand, Malfoy's sneering face kept looming up out of the darkness. This was his big chance to beat Malfoy face to face. He couldn't miss it. 11:30, Ron murmured at last. We'd better go. And sorry, because we were about to get to the intense part, but this is the end of the video. Sorry. I'll see you next time for part 2. Bye!